Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure, because today Wayne continues to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Always remember that as we go through these amazing stories and read these outstanding adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link in order to follow along with the words. Now I think that Bumblebee will be perfect to join us for today's adventure. Now that Bumblebee's here, let's jump in. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 8, The Deathday Party. October arrived, spreading a damp chill all over the grounds and into the castle. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was kept busy by a sudden spate of colds among the staff and students. Her peppercorn potion worked instantly, though it left the drinker smoking at the ears for several hours afterward. Ginny Weasley, who had been looking pale, was bullied into taking some by Percy. The steam pouring out from under her vivid hair gave the impression of her whole head was on fire. Raindrops the size of bullets thundered on the castle windows for days on end. The lake rose. The flower beds turned into muddy streams, and Hagrid's pumpkins swelled to the size of garden sheds. Oliver Wood's enthusiasm for regular training sessions, however, was not dampened, which was why Harry was to be found one stormy Saturday afternoon, a few days before Halloween, returning to Gryffindor Tower, drenched to the skin and splattered with mud. Even aside from the rain and the wind, it hadn't been a happy practice session. Fred and George, who had been spying on the Slytherin team, had seen themselves the speed of the new Nimbus 2001s. They reported that the Slytherin team was no more than several greenish blurs shooting in the air like missiles. As Harry squelched around the deserted corridor, he came across someone who looked just as preoccupied as he was. Nearly Headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, was staring morosely out the window, muttering under his breath, "Don't fulfill the requirements. Half an inch, if that." "Hello, Nick," said Harry. Hello, Nearly Headless Nick said, stating and looking around. He wore a dashing plumed hat, long curly hair, and a tunic with a ruff which concealed the fact that his neck was almost completely severed. He was pale as smoke, and Harry could see right through him to the dark sky and the torrential rain outside. "You look troubled, young Potter," said Nick, folding a transparent letter as he spoke and tucking it into his doublet. "So do you," said Harry. "Ah," said Nearly Headless Nick, waved an elegant hand. "A matter of no importance. It's not as though I wanted to join. Though I'd be happy, but apparently I don't fulfill the requirements." In spite of his airy tone, there was a look of great bitterness in his face. "But you would think, wouldn't you," he erupted suddenly, pulling the letter back out of his pocket, "that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the Headless Hunt?" Oh yes," said Harry, who was obviously supposed to agree. "I mean, nobody wishes more than I. It had been a clean and quick, and my head would come properly off. I mean, it would have saved me a great deal of pain and ridicule." However, Nearly Headless Nick shook the letter open and read furiously. "We can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it would be impossible otherwise for members to participate in activities such as a horseback head juggling and head polo. It is with great regret, therefore, that I must inform you that you do not fulfill our requirements. With very best wishes, Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore." Fuming, Nearly Headless Nick stuffed the letter away. "Half an inch of skin and sinew holding my neck on, Harry. Most people would think that would good and beheaded, but oh no, it's not nearly enough for Sir Properly Decapitated Poddor." Nearly Headless Nick took several deep breaths, and then said in a far calmer tone, "So, what's bothering you? Anything I can do?" "No," said Harry, "unless you know where we can get 7 free Nimbus 2001s for a match against Slyth." The rest of Harry's sentence was drowned out by a high-pitched mewling from somewhere near his ankles. He looked down and found himself gazing into a pair of lamp-like yellow eyes. It was Mrs. Norris, a skeletal gray cat who used by the caretaker, Argus Finch, as a sort of deputy in his endless battle against the students. "You better get out of here, Harry," said Nick quickly. "Filch isn't in a good mood. He's got the flu, and some third years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5. He's been cleaning all morning, and if he sees you dripping mud all over the place, Right, said Harry, backing away from an accusing Mrs. Norris's stare, but not quickly enough. Drawn to the spot by the mysterious power that seemed to connect him with his foul cat, Argus Filch burst suddenly through a tapestry to Harry's right, wheezing and looking wildly for the rule breaker. There was a thick tartan scarf below his head, and his nose was unusually purple. "Filth!" he shouted, his jowls a-quiver, his eyes popping alarmingly as he pointed at the muddy puddle that dripped from Harry's Quidditch robes. "Mess and muck everywhere. I've had enough of it, I tell you. Follow me, Potter." So Harry waved a gloomy goodbye at nearly Headless Nick and followed Filch back downstairs, doubling the number of muddy footprints on the floor. Harry had never been inside Filch's office before. It was a place most students avoided. The room was dingy and windowless. Oil lamp dangling from the low ceiling. A faint smell of fried fish lingered about the place. Wooden filing cabinets stood around the walls, but from their labels, Harry could see that they contained details of every pupil Filth had ever punished. Fred and George Weasley had an entire drawer to themselves. A highly polished collection of chains and manacles hung up on the wall behind Filch's desk. It was common knowledge that there was always begging Dumbledore to let him suspend students by their ankles from the ceilings. Filch grabbed a quill from a pot on his desk and began shuffling around for parchment. "Dung," he mentioned furiously. "Great sizzling dragon boggies. Frog brains, rat intestines. I've had enough of it. Make an example from where's the form? Yes." He retrieved a large roll of parchment from his desk drawer and stretched it out in front of him, dripping his long black quill into the ink pot. "Name Harry Potter. Crime?" "It was only a bit of mud," said Harry. "It's only a bit of mud to you, boy, but to me it's an extra hour of scrubbing," shouted Filch, the drips quivering unpleasantly at the end of his bulbous nose. "Crime? Defouling the castle. Suggested sentence?" Dabbling his steaming nose, Filch squinted unpleasantly at Harry, who awaited the bathed breath of his silence to fall. But as Filch lowered the quill, there was a great bang on the ceiling of the office, which made the oil lamp rattle. "Peeves!" Filch roared, flinging down his quill in a transport of rage. "I'll have you this time! I'll have you!" Without a backwards glance at Harry, Filch ran flat-footed from the office, Miss Norris streaking alongside him. Peeves was a school poltergeist who lived to cause havoc and distress. Harry didn't much like Peeves, but couldn't help but feeling grateful for his timing. Hopefully, whatever Peeves had done, it sounded as though he'd wrecked something very big this time, would distract Filch from Harry. Thinking he should wait for Filch to come back, Harry sat into the moth-eaten chair around his desk. There was only one thing on it apart from his half-completed form, a large glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on the front of it. With a quick glance at the door to check if Filch was on his way back, Harry picked up the envelope and read, "Quick Spell, or Correspondence Course for Beginner's Magic." An intrigued Harry flicked the envelope open and pulled the sheaf of parchment inside. More curly silver writing on the front page said, "Feel out of step with the world of modern magic? Find yourself making excuses not to perform simple spells? Ever feel taunted by your woeful handiwork? Here's the answer. Quick Spell is an all-new, fail-safe, result-quick, easy-learn course. Hundreds of witches and wizards have benefited from the Quick Spell method." Madam Z Nestles from Topswan writes, "I've had no memory of incantations, and my potions were a family joke. Now, after Quick Spell course, I'm the center of attention at parties, and friends beg for a recipe of my solicitation solution." Warlock DJ Prod of Dinsbury says, "My wife used to sneer at my feeble charms, but a month into the fabulous Quick Spell course, and I succeeded in turning her into a yak." Thank you, Quick Spell. Fascinated, Harry thumbed through the rest of the envelope's contents. Why on earth did Filch want a Quick Spell course? Did this mean he wasn't a proper wizard? Harry was just reading Lesson 1, Holding Your Wand, some useful tips, when shuffling footsteps outside told him Filch was coming back. Stuffing the parchment back into the envelope, Harry threw it back onto the desk just as the door opened. Filch was looking triumphant. That vanishing cabinet was extremely valuable, he was saying gleefully to Mrs. Norris. "We'll have Peeves this time, my sweet." His eyes fell on Harry and then darted to the Quick Spell envelope, which Harry realized was too late, was lying 2 feet away from where it had started. Filch's pasty face went brick red. Harry braced himself for a tidal wave of fury. Filch hobbled across to his desk, snatched the envelope and threw it into a drawer. Did you read? He spluttered. No, Harry lied quickly. Filch's knobbly hands were twisting together. If I thought you'd read my private, not that it's mine, for a friend, but be that as may. However, Harry was staring at him alarmed. Filch had never looked madder. His eyes were popping. A tick was going to be in one of his pouchy cheeks, and a tartan scarf didn't help. Very well, go. And don't breathe a word. Not that, however, if you didn't read, now go. I have to write up Peeves. Report. Go. Amazed at his luck, Harry sped out of the office, up the corridor, and back upstairs. To escape the Filch's office without punishment was probably some kind of school record. Harry, did it work? Nearly headless Nick came gliding out of the classroom. Behind him, Harry could see the wreckage of a large black and gold cabinet that appeared to have been dropped from a high height. I persuaded Peeves to crash it right over Filch's office, said Nearly Headless eagerly. Thought it might distract him. Was that you? Said Harry, gratefully. Yeah, it worked. I didn't even get detention. Thanks, Nick. They set off up the corridor together. Nearly Headless Nick, Harry motioned, was still holding Sir Patrick's rejection letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the headless hunt, Harry said. Nearly Headless Nick stopped in his tracks, then Harry walked right through him. He wished he hadn't. It was like stepping through an icy shower. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick excitedly. Harry, when I be asking too much, but no, you wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said Nearly Headless Nick, drawing himself up and looking dignified. Oh, said Harry, not sure whether he should look sorry or happy about this. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming from all over the country. It would be such an honor to have you attend. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger would be most welcome, too, of course. But I dare say you'd rather go through the school feast. He watched Harry on tetherhooks. No, said Harry quickly. I'll come. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my Deathday party. And he's hesitated, looking excited. Do you think you could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightening and impressive you find me? Of course, said Harry. Nearly Headless Nick beamed at him. A Deathday party, said Hermione keenly, had changed at last and joined her and Ron in the common room. I bet there aren't many living people who can say that they've been to one of those. It'll be fascinating. Why would anyone want to celebrate the day they died, said Ron, who was halfway through his potions work and grumpy. Sounds dead depressing to me. Rain was still lashing the windows, which was now inky black, but inside all looked bright and cheerful. The firelight glowed over the countless squashy armchairs, where people sat reading, talking, doing homework, or, in the case of Fred and George Weasley, trying to find out what would happen if you fed a filibuster firework to a salamander. Fred had rescued this brilliant orange fire-dwelling lizard from a care of magical creatures class, but it was now smoldering gently on the table, surrounded by a knot of curious people. Harry was at the point of telling Ron and Hermione about Filch and the Quickspell course when the salamander suddenly whizzed into the air, emitting loud sparks and bangs as it whirled wildly around the room. The sight of Percy bellowing himself hoarse at Fred and George, the spectacular display of tangerine stars showering through the salamander's mouth, and its escape into the fire, with accompanying explosions, drove both Filch and the Quickspell envelope out of Harry's mind. By the time Halloween arrived, Harry was regretting his rash promise to join the Deathday party. The rest of the school was happily anticipating their Halloween feast. The Great Hall had been decorated with the usual live bats. Hagrid's vast pumpkin had been carved into lanterns large enough for 3 men to sit in, and there were rumors that Dumbledore had booked a troupe of dancing skeletons for entertainment. A promise is a promise, Hermione reminded Harry bossily. You said you'd go to the Deathday party. So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the door to the packed great hallway, which was glittering invitingly with gold plates and candles, and directed their steps, instead, toward the dungeons. The passageway leading to Nearly Headless Nick's party had been lined with candles, too, though the effect was far less cheerful. These were long, thin, yet jet-black choppers, all burning bright blue, casting a ghostly light even over their living faces. The temperature dropped with every step they took. As Harry shivered and drew his robes closer around him, he heard what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping an enormous blackboard. Is that supposed to be music? Ron whispered. They turned the corner and saw Nearly Headless Nick standing at a doorway hung with black velvet drapes. My dear friends, he said mournfully, "Welcome, welcome, so pleased for you to come." He swept off his plummet hat and bowed to them. It was an incredible sight. The dungeon was full of hundreds pearly white translucent people, mostly drifting around a crowded dance floor, waltzing to the dreadful quivering sound of 30 musical saws, played by an orchestra on a raised black platform. A chandelier overhead blazed of midnight blue with 1,000 more black candles. Their breath rose in a mist before them. It was like stepping into a freezer. "Shall we have a look around?" Harry suggested, wanting to warm up his feet. "Careful not to walk through anyone," Ron said nervously. But they set off around the edge of the dance floor. They passed a group of gloomy nuns, a ragged man wearing chains, and a fat friar, a cheerful Hufflepuff ghost, who was talking to a knight with an arrow stuck in his forehead. Harry wasn't surprised to see the Bloody Baron, a gaunt, staring Slytherin ghost, covered in silver bloodstains, was even given a wide berth by the other ghosts. "Oh no," said Hermione, stopping abruptly. Turn back, turn back. I don't want to talk to Moaning Myrtle." "Who?" said Harry, as they backtracked quickly. "She haunts one of the girls' toilets in the bathroom on the first floor," said Hermione. "She haunts a toilet?" "Yes, it's been out of order all year because she keeps having tantrums and flooding the place. I never went in there anywhere if I could avoid it. It's awful trying to have a pee with her wailing at you." "Look, food," said Ron. On the other side of the dungeon was a long table, also covered in black velvet. They approached it eagerly, but next moment had stopped in their tracks, horrified. The smell was quite disgusting. Large rotten fish were laid on handsome silver platters. Cakes burned charcoal black were heaped on salvers. There was a great maggoty haggis. Ugh! A slab of cheese covered in green mold, and a pride of place, an enormous great cake of the shape of a tombstone with a tar-like icing forming the words, "Sir Nicholas de Mimsey Porpington, died 31st October 1492. Harry watched amazed as a portly ghost approached the table, crouched low, and walked through it, his mouth had wide open as it passed through one of the stinking salmon. "Can you taste as you walk through it?" Harry asked him. "Almost," said the ghost slyly, and drifted away. "I expect they've let it rot to give it a stronger flavor," said Hermione acknowledgeably, pinching her nose and leaning closer to look at the putrid haggis. "Can we move? I feel sick," said Ron. They had barely turned around, however, when a little man swooped suddenly from under the table, came to a halt in midair before them. "Hello, Peeves," said Harry cautiously. Unlike the ghosts around them, Peeves the poltergeist was the very reverse of pale and transparent. He was wearing a bright orange party hat, a revolving bow tie, and a broad grin on his wide, wrinkled face. "Nibbles?" he said swiftly, offering them a bowl of peanut-covered fungus. "No thanks," said Hermione. "Heard you talking about poor Myrtle," said Peeves, his eyes dancing. "Rude you was about poor Myrtle." He took a deep breath and bellowed, "Oi, Myrtle!" "Oh no, Peeves, don't tell her what I said. She'll be really upset," Hermione whispered frantically. "I didn't mean it. I don't mean her. Oh, hello, Myrtle." The squat ghost of a girl had glided over. She had the gloomiest face Harry had ever seen, half hidden by a lank hair and thick, pearly spectacles. "What?" she said sulkily. "How are you, Myrtle?" said Hermione in a falsely bright voice. "It's nice to see you out of the toilet." Myrtle sniffed. "Miss Granger was just talking about you," said Peeves shyly in Myrtle's ear. "Just saying, how nice you look tonight," said Hermione, glaring at Peeves. Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. "You're making fun of me," she said, silvery tears welling rapidly in her small, see-through eyes. "No, honestly. Didn't I say how nice Myrtle's looking?" said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron painfully in the ribs. "Oh yeah, she did." "Don't lie to me," Myrtle gasped, tears now flowing down her face, while Peeves chuckled happily over her shoulder. "Do you think I don't know what people call me behind my back? Fat Myrtle, ugly Myrtle, miserable, moaning, mopey Myrtle." "Yes, forgotten pimply," Peeves hissed in her ear. Moaning Myrtle burst into anguished sobs and fled from the dungeon. Peeves shot after her, pelting her with moldy peanuts, yelling, "Pimply, pimply!" "Oh no," said Hermione sadly. Nearly Headless Nick now drifted towards the crowd. "Enjoying yourselves?" "Oh yes," they lied. "Not a bad turnout," said Nearly Headless Nick proudly. "The Wailing Widow came all the way from Kent. It's nearly time for my speech. I'd better go warn the orchestra." The orchestra, however, stopped playing at that very moment. They, and everyone else in the dungeon, fell silent, looking around in excitement as a haunting horn sounded. "Oh, here we go," said Nearly Headless Nick. Through the dungeon wall burst a dozen ghost horses. each hidden by a headless horseman. The assembly clapped wildly. Harry started to clap too, but stopped quickly at the sight of Nick's face. The horses galloped to the middle of the dance floor and halted, rearing and plunging. At the front of the pack was a large ghost who held his bearded head under his arm, from which position he gave a blowing of a horn. The ghost leapt down, lifted his head up high in the air so he could see over the crowd. Everyone laughed. He strode up to nearly headless Nick, squashing his head back onto his neck. "Nick," he roared, "how are you? Head still hanging in there?" He gave a hearty guffaw and clapped nearly headless on the shoulder. "Welcome, Patrick," said Nick stiffly. "Live 'uns," said Sir Patrick, spotted Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and gave him a huge, fake jump of astonishment, so his head fell off. The crowd howled with laughter. "Very amusing," said nearly headless Nick darkly. "Don't mind Nick," shouted Sir Patrick's head from the floor. "Still upset we won't let him join the hunt. But I mean to say, look at the fellow." "I think," said Harry hurriedly, in a meaningful look at Nick, "Nick's very frightening in her—" "Ha!" said Sir Patrick's head. "Bet he asked you to say that. If I could have everyone's attention, it's time for my speech," said nearly headless Nick loudly, striding to the podium and climbing up to the icy blue platform. "My late lamented lords, ladies, and gentlemen, it is my great sorrow." But nobody heard much more. Sir Patrick and the rest of the headless hunt had just started a game of head hockey, and the crowd was turning to watch. Nearly headless Nick tried in vain to recapture his audience, but gave up as Sir Patrick's head went sailing past him to loud cheers. Harry was very cold by now, not to mention hungry. "I can't stand much more of this," Ron muttered, his teeth chattering as the orchestra ground back into action and the ghosts swept back onto the dance floor. "Let's go," Harry had agreed. They backed away towards the door, nodding and beaming at everyone, and looked around. A minute later, were hurrying back to the passageway full of candles. "Pudding might not be finished yet," said Ron hopefully, leading the way towards the steps of the great entrance hall. And then Harry heard it. "Rip, tell, kill." It was the same voice, the same cold, murderous voice he had heard in Lockhart's office. He stumbled to halt, clutching the stone wall, listening to with all his might, looking around squintly in the dark, dimly-lit passageway. "Harry, what are you—" "It's the voice again. Shut up a minute." "So hungry for so long." "Listen," said Harry urgently, and Ron and Hermione rose, watching him. "Kill. Time to kill." The voice was growing fainter. Harry was sure it was moving away. A mixture of fear and excitement gripped him as he stared at the dark ceiling. Could it be moving upward? Was it a phantom to whom stone ceilings didn't matter? "This way," he shouted, and began to run up the stairs into the entrance hall. It was no good hoping to hear anything here. The babble of talk from the Halloween feast was echoing from the great hall. Harry sprinted up the marble staircase to the first floor, Ron and Harry clattering behind him. "Harry, what are we—" "Shh!" Harry strained his ears. Distantly from the floor above, and growing fainter and fainter still, he heard the voice, "I smell blood. I smell blood." His stomach lurched. "It's going to kill someone," he shouted, and ignoring Ron and Hermione's bewildered faces, he ran up to the next flight of steps. 3 at a time, listening and listening over those pounding footsteps. Harry hurtled around the foot where the second floor was, and Ron and Hermione panting behind him, not stopping until they turned a corner at last, deserted passageway. "Harry, what was that all about?" said Ron, whipping sweat from his hands. "I couldn't hear anything." But Hermione gave a sudden gasp, pointing down the corridor. "Look!" Something was shining on the wall ahead. They approached slowly, squinting through the darkness. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall between the 2 windows, shimmering in the light cast by the flaming torches. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air beware." "What is that thing hanging underneath?" said Ron, a slight quiver in his voice. As they edged nearer, Harry almost slipped. There was a large puddle of water on the floor. Ron and Hermione grabbed him, and they inched toward the message, his eyes fixed on the dark shadow beneath it. All 3 of them realized what it was at once and leapt backward with a splash. Miss Norse, the caretaker's cat, was hanging by her tail from the torch bracket. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. For a few seconds, they didn't move. Then Ron said, "Let's get out of here." "Shouldn't we try to help?" Harry began awkwardly. "Trust me," Ron began. "We don't want to be found here." "Good thought." But it was too late. A rumble, as though distant of thunder, told them that the feast had just ended. From either end of the corridor where they stood came a sound of hundreds of feet climbing the stairs. The loud, happy talk of well-fed people. Next moment, students were crashing into the passageway from both ends. The chatter, the bustle, the noise died. Suddenly, as people in front spotted the hanging cat, Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood alone in the middle of the corridor as silence fell among the mass of students pressing forward to see the grisly sight. Then someone shouted through the quiet, "Enemies of the air beware! You'll be next, mudbloods." It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed up to the front of the crowd, his cold eyes alive, his usually bloodless face flushed as he grinned at the sight of the hanging immobile cat. Oh wow, that is a pretty crazy place to end today's story. What did you think, Bumblebee? Yeah, I'm a little scared as well. I hope things are okay. We'll see you on the next adventure, okay? And we'll see you on the next adventure here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye!